Voice Radio, covering the latest state and local issues with Tom Fallbush, Bob Scott, and Jim Waters.
And happy Friday to you, Kentucky. This is David Walls, Executive Director of the Family Foundation of Kentucky, and you're listening to Kentucky's Voice, where faith, family, and freedom are always at the center of the conversation. I'm excited to get to be your guest host again today as we take a look at the cultural, legal, and spiritual crossroads of our state and nation, and how we as people of faith and conviction can respond with clarity, courage, and truth. It's good to be on the program again. For those that may not be familiar with the Family Foundation, we are a Christian public policy organization on the front lines defending Kentucky families and the biblical values that make them strong. We work toward a vision of a state and a nation where God is honored, religious freedom flourishes, families thrive, and life is cherished. And you can learn more, as always, at our website at kentuckyfamily.org to get plugged in, to receive our action alerts, our prayer devotionals, and other resources for your church, and so much more. But again, I'm just excited to be here. I hope you're staying warm with this ongoing frigid weather to be underway in Frankfort. This is our 60-day budget session. Very important legislative session that's going on right now. And, here at the Family Foundation, we seek to educate and equip folks about God-honoring public policy. And there's been some really important bills that have already been filed this legislative session that we just want to make listeners and viewers aware of if you're not already. One of those is House Bill 170 by Representative T.J. Roberts. This is an important bill to strengthen Kentucky's existing Religious Freedom Restoration Act. We recognize that our religious freedom is our most foundational, our first freedom, but Kentucky has some holes and gaps in our state religious freedom protections. And so House Bill 170 would strengthen that. And so that's incredibly important. Another one is the need to protect medical conscience rights. This has been an issue that we and many others have advocated on for many legislative sessions. Almost got across the finish line last year on a medical conscience bill that passed the Senate but didn't get taken up in the House on the very last day. But once again, Senator Donald Douglas has filed the medical conscience rights bill, and that is Senate Bill 72. And so that's an incredibly important bill as well. Another one that I just want to mention up front for folks is an important issue dealing with how the sales tax is impacting churches and church ministries. And so House Bill 101, that's a bill by Representative James Tipton. He has filed a bill that would repeal the sales and use tax as it applies to churches and their ministries so that they no longer have to register with the government and collect sales tax on ministry activities. That's an incredible burden. It's an entanglement of church and state that we should not have here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And so that's an incredibly important bill as well. I should mention, we have action alerts set up on our website at kentuckyfamily.org on each one of these bills and others. You can go to our website right now and send a message to your legislator in support of these important bills. So I just wanted to mention a couple of those important bills, and we'll be having some more conversations on legislative items as we move along today. We really do have a great program. I'm really excited that we're going to be joined by two very special guests today. One of them is my good friend, Jonathan Saenz, who is president and attorney of Texas Values, which is our allied family policy council in the Lone Star State. Jonathan will be joining me here just in a few minutes in our opening segments. And then in the second half of the program, I'm really excited that Kentucky State Senator Max Wise, who is also the Senate Majority Floor Leader, will be joining us. And we will be looking to discuss their important work, some key legal and policy decisions that have been going on both in D.C. and across the country as we look to shape the culture and the political landscape and discuss what they mean for Kentucky and the nation. So again, thanks for joining us. We have got a great program ahead. Looking forward to our conversations. Stay with us.
To Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
Welcome to Kentucky's Voice. And again, happy Friday to you. I hope you're staying warm on this Another frigid day here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I'm David Walls. I'm Executive Director of the Family Foundation, and you're listening again to Kentucky's Voice, where faith, family, and freedom are always at the center of the conversation. We've got a great program for you today, and I'm very excited again that I've got two very special guests that will be joining me. First, Jonathan Saenz, who is president and attorney of Texas Values. And then in the second half of the program, I'm excited that our Kentucky State Senator, Max Wise, who's just a great pro-family, pro-life champion in our Kentucky General Assembly, is going to be joining me. But first, I've got Jonathan, and I've got to just share a little bit about Jonathan to tee him up here. But really excited for Jonathan to be here. Jonathan is actually my former boss. If folks know me, was honored to work with Jonathan for a number of years for Texas Values, the Family Policy Council in Texas. It does very similar work to what the Family Foundation does here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. But Jonathan, again, is the president and attorney of Texas Values. And in fact, he was recently sworn in as an official member of the Supreme Court Bar. I got to visit with Jonathan just a week and a half ago when we were up at the Supreme Court for the Save Women's Sports oral arguments. But Jonathan, thanks for taking time and being with us today.
Well, it's great to be with you, and I'm glad we're doing the show indoors.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know what the weather's been like in Austin, but it's been downright frigid here.
Well, look, I mean, I was out with my morning walk with a group of guys, and there was still a little bit of ice in certain areas, but most of it has burned off, if you will. But it was about 35 degrees, which is about 30 degrees lower than I like it. But, I won't complain too much. But, you know how it is here when the ice forms, but we've gotten through it. And, there's a lot of important work that I wanted to get back to this week. But it did allow me to catch my breath after coming back from Washington, D.C. in the March for Life.
Yeah. So, and just, continue to encourage folks to be praying for our United States Supreme Court with the oral arguments that took place on the Save Women's Sports case. This is going to be a monumental decision that's going to impact laws passed here in Kentucky and Texas and over half the states on these common sense laws to keep men out of women's sports. But I wanted to visit with Jonathan on a couple of items because he was recently in Louisiana at the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, actually with some of our allies from Louisiana, because a very important case was actually just argued at the Fifth Circuit regarding Texas's and Louisiana's 10 Commandments in the classroom case. And I know, Jonathan, you and Texas Values played such an integral role in getting that bill across the finish line. We knew that there was going to be legal challenges that were going to happen. Share a little bit about the process and how that bill got passed and what it does in Texas.
Absolutely. And after I talk about this, or while we're talking about it, we've got a great website set up, 10commandmentstexas.com, so people can go check that out and get a lot of good information. And, if you're in whatever state or people in Texas, you want to make sure they're aware of it, or you want to see what we're doing. A lot of good details there about how the law works and about where things are legally and policy-wise right now. But the Texas 10 Commandments law is very straightforward. There's got to be a display of the 10 Commandments in every public school classroom. Now, the legislation does give certain measurements and suggestions and requirements on the size of it and things of that nature. It can't be hidden in some corner. It has to be in a place in the classroom that people can actually see it. But other than that, that's it. It has to be displayed, but it's not required for students to read it. It's not required for students to believe it. It's not even required for students to acknowledge that they saw it when they were in the classroom. But the law does require that this display be in every public school classroom, which could be a lot of public school classrooms across the state of Texas. There are 1,200 school districts in the state of Texas. We estimate there are about 300,000 public school classrooms. So it's a lot of ground to cover. But the way that the law works is people donate the posters to the school districts, and then the school districts hang them up. And so it doesn't cost taxpayers any money. So it's not requiring funds to be used for this. I don't think that would be much of a concern if that was the case, but that is not how the law is written. So it just gives a little bit more strength there across the board for people constitutionally. And, look, Louisiana's got a similar law. Arkansas is taking a look at this. Other states are looking at this. But the reason for this is to make sure students are aware of the historical and significance of the Ten Commandments and their connection to law and policy as a part of America's founding. You know, there were Ten Commandments displays in public school classrooms for many years until a case in 1980 of Stone v. Graham. And so
a Kentucky case,
yeah,
Jonathan.
Right. I don't want to rub it in a little bit on you there, but that is where it came from. But hey, good news. I think, you know, that case is about to matter no more because the Fifth Circuit, there was a lot of discussion about this. But nonetheless, so there's some history of this. So it's not like Texas and Louisiana and other states are all of a sudden doing this. That's another reason why it's constitutional and why it's relevant. This is what schools were doing for a long time prior to the 1980 court decision.
Yeah, well, Jonathan, it's really it really is. We're seeing the ramifications in culture right now of a public school system that removed God from the classroom. And really, you know, nothing was symbolizes more than that than maybe removing the Ten Commandments. And obviously, there were the prayer cases as well. But Jonathan, so the bill passed. You know, I've seen, you know, been following some of what's going on. Are we still seeing those anti-religious freedom advocates trying to keep the Ten Commandments out of the classroom? With
absolutely.
The challenge. Share a little bit about what happened at the Fifth Circuit.
You'll remember from your time here that, you know, we categorize those groups as, you know, ban the Bible advocates, if you will, because a lot of times that's what they're trying to do in a variety of ways. But this bill is just about the Ten Commandments, and it's not about anything specific in whatever, you know, Bible readings. Obviously, the Ten Commandments come from the Old Testament of the Bible. But yeah, there's been people that have squawked about it and expressed their concern, but a lot of times it's a misunderstanding of how the law works and what it requires. And like, oh, the kids don't have to read it. They don't have to believe it. It's not even being taught. Teachers do not even have to comment about it. A student could ask a question and the teacher could say, that's not something that I'm discussing or that's a part of what we do in this law. It just has to be hanging up. And that is a display, just like a lot of other displays that are part of America's founding. You know, our national motto, "In God We Trust," you know, the Declaration of Independence, a lot of these documents that were part of America's founding. And the Supreme Court has said before that there is historical significance of the Ten Commandments being seen publicly. We know there's a Ten Commandments monument on the Texas Capitol grounds that was upheld at the U.S. Supreme Court in 2005, argued before the U.S. Supreme Court by our current governor, Greg Abbott, who was Attorney General at the time. But nonetheless, the ACLU brought some New York lawyers down to Texas. That is exactly what happened, and they've sued to stop it. There is a court decision in place. There's two of them, but it only impacts 25 out of the 1,200 school districts in the state of Texas. So the rest of the state should be following this law, but I think we're going to have victory. So this case gets appealed to the Fifth Circuit. And here's the significance thing too. A lot of times when court cases are appealed to the federal Fifth Circuit or the Federal Court of Appeals, whatever part of the state, the country it is, it's usually three judges, a three-judge panel, because there are more than that on this court. But they decided to hear it en banc, basically the entire court. There were 7 judges in the courtroom in New Orleans. And the Fifth Circuit is Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. There are a collection of states that make up the Fifth Circuit. That's why this case was being heard in New Orleans, Louisiana, and not Texas. But Texas and Louisiana's laws were up there together being reviewed. And so you had all 17 judges, like in the shape of like a horseshoe, right? Yeah. I just barely got into the courtroom. The courtroom was overflowed. The overflow room was overflowed. The governor of Louisiana was there. The attorney general of Louisiana was there. But the Solicitor Generals, the top appeals lawyers for each state, were arguing the case. And I tell you what, the ACLU lawyer, he was in trouble from the beginning. Jim Ho, who used to be the Solicitor General for Texas, is on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. And basically, he got to a position where the ACLU was admitting if you read the Declaration of Independence or you recite the Pledge of Allegiance in public school classrooms, that also would be unconstitutional. And it just baffled the judge. Like, we've already ruled on these things before.
Yeah, Jonathan, it's so ridiculous. You know, it seems to me now that the ACLU's understanding of these issues would really just flip completely upside down the founding of this country and our religious heritage.
No, you're right. And they're still going through the stages of grief because the Coach Joe Kennedy case at the U.S. Supreme Court restored a religious liberty standard that was there before, and means that the ACLU is no longer going to win these type of challenges.
Yeah. Well, we were blessed to have Coach Kennedy on this program here last year. Yeah. But Jonathan, you mentioned the Ten Commandments monument at the Texas Capitol grounds. And if listeners may know, if you're not aware, here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, we were thankfully blessed to help support the effort to get the Ten Commandments monument, which almost looks identical to the Texas one, put back to the Kentucky Capitol grounds right before the end of the year. And we certainly thank God for that, and the work of so many in the General Assembly, and our work of our friends, Jonathan, at First Liberty as well.
Yep.
But as we've been saying, we got the Ten Commandments restored to its proper place on the Capitol grounds. But what's good for the Capitol, what's good for our legislators, must be good for the students of the Commonwealth of Kentucky as well. And so I am just thankful for the work that Texas and Louisiana and so many others are doing. And I think, while that is the Fifth Circuit, and here in Kentucky, we're in the Sixth Circuit, I think we and so many others are going to be looking to what the Fifth Circuit does in that case. And my hope and prayer is that it continues to build momentum here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky so we can get the Ten Commandments monument restored to the classroom as well. Well, Jonathan's going to be with us in the next segment, and so I appreciate him hanging with us as we talk about some important pro-life issues. Stay tuned.
Are you ready to stand for truth? Kentucky is at a crossroads, and we need voices that won't back down. This is your moment to rise, speak up, and be part of a movement that's changing the narrative in the Commonwealth. Kentucky's Voice is calling on bold citizen journalists, fearless editors, and those unafraid to speak truth in the public square. Volunteer, intern, contribute. Scan the QR code or visit kyvoice.org to join the fight. This is more than media. This is your moment. You are Kentucky's voice.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And we're back. Good to be with you. David Walls here, Executive Director of the Family Foundation. It's always fun to get to go guest host Kentucky's Voice. I'm excited that our guest from the first segment, Jonathan Saenz, my friend and president and attorney of Texas Values, is still with us. And we had a good conversation about the Ten Commandments issue and the need to restore the Ten Commandments monument back to its proper place in the classroom, both in Kentucky and across the nation, really, in the first segment. But I wanted to switch a little gears with Jonathan here and talk about the issue of life, which is a foundational issue. It's foundational to the work that I feel called to do and the work that the Family Foundation does. Having known and worked with Jonathan for a number of years, there is no more passionate pro-life advocate, I will tell you, in the pro-life movement than Jonathan. But before we get into some of the policy discussions and some of the legislation, I know Jonathan was actually just up in Washington, D.C. At the March for Life, and looked like he had a great time. Looked like they had a phenomenal crowd up there, and I saw that actually he got to connect and see some of our Kentucky folks that were up there as well. But Jonathan, what are your reflections just from the state of the pro-life movement, having just been at the nation's largest pro-life gathering?
Well, look, it was exciting and wonderful to be in Washington, D.C. for the March for Life. And, the field of it's changed a little bit since Roe versus Wade was overturned by the Dobbs v. Jackson case in 2022. But you wouldn't know that being at this event. I mean, the crowd is just as big. I mean, the Vice President of the United States was there speaking. Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, who's, from Louisiana, was there and, close with a lot of our friends and colleagues. And I did some legal work with Mike Johnson many years ago with our friends at First Liberty Institute, but just a lot of excitement. And this is what I tell people that have never been before. Do not be surprised when you go and you see that the overwhelming majority of people are young people. They are teenagers. They are college students. They are part of college and high school groups. As a matter of fact, that's why I was there. I was chaperoning the high school group from my students' high school, which I do from time to time. I go up there sometimes professionally. But I also had jeans on, and your crowd may not know this, but a lot of times people see me a lot in suit, and I'm like, yeah, I had blue jeans on walking through, but just an incredible, exciting atmosphere. And the weather was mild. Sometimes it's snowing, at this time of year up in DC, but that doesn't stop people. And, and the other thing too, it's an overwhelmingly polite and, upbeat kind of crowd, right? I mean, these are people that care about life, right? They care about other people. The other thing that was a little bit different, I didn't see a lot of protesters, and usually there's not a ton of them and a lot of hostility, but you'll see a little bit from time to time. And even the students remarked, they were like, wow, Mr. Signs or my kid's dad, I didn't see a lot of people protesting. There really was, I think we may have saw one instance of it. And so I do think that's an indication of how strong the pro-life movement is. But momentum is on our side. And there's still a lot of work to do on the life issue. And I was having some conversations when I was up there. I was at the White House. I was at the U.S. Capitol with the group and for other reasons. And so, but there's a lot of things that are going in the right direction. Texas has been leading on that. A lot of other great states. And we've got a president who supports the life issue. He did a video that was there at the March for Life, but he was the first president that spoke at the March for Life several years ago. And so, again, still a lot of work to do on the life issue, but I do think momentum is on our side. And I do think publicly people understand this issue a lot more. The Texas heartbeat law had a lot to do with that when people are like, wow, a baby at 6 weeks has a heartbeat. Why are we not protecting it? And so, but, we'll be looking at those strategies. But I love being around that environment because it is very encouraging. There's a lot of enthusiasm, and it shows you this next generation, they're ready to lead, and they're ready to have their voice heard, and they're ready to make a difference.
Yeah. Well, that's encouraging. And I want to share with folks and just remind folks that in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, our March for Life at the Kentucky Capitol will be coming up on March 11th. So I encourage folks, we're a sponsor of that event with our good friends at Kentucky Right to Life and Adia Wushner, and they do such great work. But encourage folks to mark that on your calendar, and if you can, make plans to join us as we March for Life here in Kentucky on March 11th. But Jonathan, while there has been some encouraging things, certainly in pro-life states like Kentucky and Texas, have made some strides defending the preborn. And, I think these marches remind us, certainly the National March for Life, that the battle to protect the preborn is something that has to be fought continually, day by day. We have to fight it at the federal level. We have to fight it at the state level. We have to fight it at the local level. But as we sit here right now, one of the realizations that for us as pro-lifers is that we're still losing lives of preborn children, even in states with the laws that we have in Kentucky and Texas, which effectively prohibit abortion. And so much of that is because of the chemical abortion pill, what I like to call the abortion death pill, because every single time this pill is taken effectively, it ends the life of a preborn child. So it is a death pill. And then also we know, and the studies continue to show, that the complications, serious medical complications for mothers from the abortion death pill far exceeds even surgical abortions. And so this is really the battle to protect life right now is the battle to deal with the illegal proliferation of the abortion death pill in pro-life states. And so Texas addressed that in y'all's most recent legislative session. It's an issue that is front and center in the Kentucky General Assembly going on right now. Jonathan, just share a little bit in our last few minutes about y'all's effort to get a bill to help protect against this deadly pill.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and look, I mean, a lot of people have said in the pro-life movement that the majority of abortions now are a result of this abortion pill. They're not surgical abortions. Obviously, those are illegal in Texas and a lot of other states, but even in other parts of the country, we've seen this trend over the years building to this point where a majority of abortions are taking place in a girl's bathroom or a girl's dorm room, right? Which is not a safe place to be when things don't go well with these pills. And oftentimes they don't. Oftentimes not only does the baby die, and I think it's a great way to describe it, sadly, but I think it's accurate, what you called it, the abortion death pill. But there are a lot of times there are consequences, there are side effects that are deadly. Young girls are bleeding to death as a result of these pills. Girls are misled about what to expect. A lot of these pills are being taken in 12, 14, and 16 weeks of the baby being developed. You can only imagine what that's like for a young lady at any age. And a lot of times it's in secrecy. So even if the parents are having a conversation or it's a young girl, they're not aware of that. There's tragic stories where girls don't make it to the ladies don't make it to the emergency room in time and they die. But a lot of this has created an opportunity for fraud. So we've been cracking down on that with our state law that puts a lot more penalties in place that allows people to sue these businesses, even if they're not in Texas, to sue these abortion providers that are from other states that are somehow facilitating these pills. As a matter of fact, I think our Attorney General, Ken Paxton, announced this week a new lawsuit on this matter. And it took us a couple of special sessions to get it done in 2025. but we did. And that's what we need to do. When we see these areas where, okay, we need to have a better enforcement here, we need to have enforcement here, because in that will not only does it keep Texas pro-life, but it means in other parts of the country, it's much more difficult in those other states for them to exploit those things or to take Texans somewhere else to allow these things to happen. And it allows the public to learn more about really what the abortion industry is always been about. And it's about money. It's not about caring about the woman and child.
Yeah, no, this is a $1 billion industry that profits off of killing preborn children, and as we know too, Planned Parenthood involved in so much other very harmful stuff, whether it be the transgender ideology and trying to trans children and all of those things. But Jonathan, in our last just few seconds, we continue to have some that say, oh well, in Kentucky, we've already got important pro-life laws. Why is it still important that we address some of these chemical abortion pills issues really from the enforcement side?
Well, look, you can pass a lot of different pieces of legislation and the governors can sign a lot of things into law. But if they're not being enforced and people are not aware of them, you're not really getting a lot of value of that, and they're not doing what they're supposed to do. And so a lot of times people forget about that, and we celebrate, and there's a great law passed. A lot of times people don't even know about it. I still have people coming up to me in Texas and talking about how we can, make abortion illegal and we can move the line here. I'm like, we've already done all that. What do you mean? Yeah. And so having attorney generals, district attorneys, because sometimes you have district attorneys, local attorneys that will not enforce it. So the focus on enforcement is huge for the pro-life movement.
Enforcement is so key. So, and I'm so thankful for the work that y'all help do in Texas. I'm hopeful that we can do something similar here in Kentucky. Thank you, Jonathan, for joining us today. It was great to talk with you, brother.
Great to be with you.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And it's good to be back with you. Happy Friday to you again on another cold and frigid day in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, but a beautiful day, a beautiful day. I'm David Walls, Executive Director of the Family Foundation. It's always a pleasure to get to guest host this program. And part of the fun is just the opportunity we have on this program to get to talk with some great guests and some folks that are doing important work, standing up for faith, family, and freedom here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And one of those folks certainly is my next guest, and that is State Senator Max Wise. Senator Wise is the Senate Majority Floor Leader in the Kentucky Senate. And so prior to being state senator in the 16th district, he was actually a part of the FBI and their counterterrorism unit in Washington, D.C., and he's also taught political science at Campbellsville University, as well as the University of Kentucky. So he's got quite the varied and diverse background. But Senator Wise, thank you so much for joining us on Kentucky's Voice.
David, thank you for having me on, my friend.
Well, Senator Wise, I'd love to just, because I think this is the first time you've been able to join Kentucky's Voice program, and you're in such an important role and leadership role in the Kentucky Senate, but just would love to give you an opportunity just to share a little bit about yourself and what led you to run for office and to continue serving in the leadership role that you're in now.
Well, appreciate that opportunity, and it's an honor to be on your show and to speak with you and all of your listeners that you have. My background is kind of unique and diverse. I was never an elected official before running for the Kentucky State Senate in May. This will be my 12th year as an elected official. My background is pretty diverse. You mentioned my work in the FBI, but born and raised in Campbellsville, Kentucky. My mother was the women's basketball coach at Campbellsville College then, and now Campbellsville University for 32 years. So kind of grew up right there on a Baptist affiliated college, and all encompassing, Christian atmosphere that Campbellsville had, and was a student there. I just also stayed with my mom coaching. I looked at other schools, but I have a familiarity of being on the campus so much, and the faith-based principles that Campbellsville University stands for, and it was a great fit for me. My father was with Fruit of the Loom. He was an HR manager there, and has been in business his whole life. And the opportunity to go to Campbellsville, then after that on to graduate school at the University of Kentucky. They've got a school of diplomacy, international commerce. I specialized in foreign affairs, intelligence, national security, and then it took me to kind of my dream as a boy growing up was to work for the FBI. I saw the movie David Silence of the Lambs, and I know that probably sounds
Okay.
maybe sickening for some people. Of why would you want to go into this line of work? But I found that intriguing. Not coming from a family of law enforcement, but
Yeah.
I always really respected the men and women of the FBI with their integrity that they work with, and so was able to kind of achieve that bucket list and the goal of working for the bureau, and did that for a number of years. So it took me to Washington D.C., then back to Lexington, Kentucky, as a member of the Joint Terrorism Task Force. And my wife Heather was in dental school during that time at the University of Kentucky, and then she decided to make the move back to my hometown of Camelsville, and she's from Glasgow, Kentucky. And then with the Bureau, kind of put that to the side because I didn't want to make another move that sometimes the Bureau does for some of their employees. And a great decision for me to get back in my hometown community, and opportunity then to run for office in the Kentucky State Senate. And it's kind of where I've been since then. I love the work that I do. I always campaigned on there's no title before my name. I am who I am. I'm Max. And I've tried to live out that with my public service of campaigning on the principles that I stood for. You know, being a Christian and a husband and a father of 4 children. The most important thing for me is standing up, just like you mentioned with your show, of faith, family, and freedom. Those are the things that I try to also instill in my daily walk of life. And so been very fortunate to have guided some pieces of legislation during my time, especially as a rank and file member. And this is my second year in my role as the Kentucky Senate Majority Leader. So now I kind of look at myself as kind of the point guard or the quarterback of the caucus, of where I'm lifting up other members. I'm making sure that they also are getting their bills passed and bringing those types of bills that we stand for as a conservative base of our caucus, to get those bills to the floor and to work with our House colleagues on their bills that may come over the threshold. Okay. And so, just working alongside in my role there of House colleagues, Senate colleagues, of getting, our legislation, forth and to hopefully become some good conservative piece of legislation into law.
Yeah. Well, and as I was saying, we're continue to be so thankful for your leadership. And, I think it's really important for folks to know the importance of, obviously, we're thankful for all those that have the calling to serve and to seek to honor the Lord in particular, as serving as ministers of government. But also it's so incredibly important, I think, for folks to understand the importance of the leadership positions in both chambers. They really do kind of serve as the gatekeepers of important pieces of legislation in both chambers. And so when you have folks in leadership like Senator Wise and other good folks in leadership, but when you have folks in leadership that are really willing to do what you said, which is to lead is to serve and to build up the other members that you're serving, because that's just, that's what leadership is. And I think we've seen, even in the last year or so since you've been on the leadership team, how the effectiveness of your leadership. So we're thankful for that. One of the big issues that I wanted to talk with you about, and listeners of this program and followers of the Family Foundation and our work will be familiar with, but Senator Wise was the lead author on Senate Bill 150 that passed 2 years ago now. Back in 2023, and that was the bill came together with several different pieces, but one of them was to protect our kids from these radical gender transitions. There was also some important parental rights protections as it relates to our education, both incredibly important issues. And Senator Wise, I just have to say to you, that bill got a lot of pushback, if you will recall, as we all do. But last year, the United States Supreme Court upheld, in the Skrmetti decision, upheld Kentucky's and many other states' laws to protect kids from these harmful gender transitions. And so I just wanted to give you an opportunity just to reflect on that. What does it feel like to pass a bill? And I know a number of other states did, but to play a key role in such an important bill protecting children that ultimately led to a landmark U.S. Supreme Court decision.
David, that was in terms of legislation that I've had. I've had a very diverse portfolio of bills. As education committee chairman, a lot of my work before has been on education policy, and I made a commitment to protect children, being a father of 4, but also of common sense legislation, making sure that for anything that may be out there to harm our children, that I would stand in that path, and I would stand in the valley to make sure that I'm doing the work that my constituents also would expect for me to do, for them. And so with that piece of legislation, you're right. There was a lot of people that have caused it controversy. I call it a lot of common sense of what we were looking to do. And I will also say that some of the studies we were seeing from Europe and others about gender transition surgeries and how harmful it was, we knew on our side here in Kentucky of what that could lead to, of making sure that a child under that age, was not making this decision or being pressured into this type of decision because of the harmful mental effects and so many things that can come from that. And so I was proud of my colleagues to stand with me. You never know sometimes when you file a bill, what can come about with that. But at the end of the day, that bill also dealt with bathroom issues. We worked on the House side with some legislation that had been filed over there, and so we kind of made it an omnibus bill that was centered around pronouns, of not forcing a teacher and a school employee to have to call a child by a pronoun. And so, with that, I was very humbled that my caucus, allowed me to carry a bill such as that, and to see, at the end of the day, what we were able to achieve here in Kentucky. And then, as you mentioned, anything that goes up to the Supreme Court and that can be upheld of the laws that we're passing here in Kentucky, that's a great win for us in the Commonwealth.
Yeah, and speaking of the Supreme Court, I'm going to look back at another piece of legislation, and we're excited. We'll visit with Senator Wise about some ongoing legislation in our final segment. But I just have to mention, because I just had the pleasure of being up at the United States Supreme Court with thousands of allies from across the nation, as the Supreme Court just heard oral arguments in the Save Women's Sports case, which was passed in the Kentucky General Assembly back in 2022, as we continue to fight and stand for common sense to keep men out of women's sports. But even bigger than that, standing for biological truth, standing for reality, standing for a culture in which we recognize that there are men and women, and there are reasons why we have these distinctions. Sports obviously is an important one. But Senator Wise, I was reflecting on, I remember when that bill was being debated back in 2022, you got up and gave a very powerful speech on the Senate floor, and you referenced your mom, who has been coached a female basketball team, very, very well known for many years. And I remember you saying some version of, my mom knows what a woman is. And knows that it's important that we have female athletes, female athletics for women. But somehow, even a couple years later, and we're thankful for all the momentum we still have the raging debate from some on the radical left that can't answer the question, what is a woman? It just kind of boggles the mind. But Senator Wise, what's your reflections on that issue, especially in light of what all's happened over the last couple of years?
Well, so much credit to my colleague, Senator Robbie Mills, that led on that on the Senate side with that piece of legislation. And David, you're right. With my mom coached for 32 years. She fought with Title IX of making equity with women's sports and with male sports. And then to see what was happening after she'd retired from coaching of this, my mom never got politically active or engaged. But I will tell you, she was one to say, what are we doing here? For so many years. And the troublesome thing I had with this also, David, was the number of women athletes that would not also speak out for their own sport. They were terrified or being, of being, hostile of any comment they make. That is absolutely ridiculous. We need to make sure that those coaches and those women who are participating stand up. I'm glad to see fathers that are standing up for their daughters who are playing women's sports.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Get some personalities like Charles Barkley coming out and saying, this is wrong. So we need more of that today's time.
Yeah, we certainly do, and we look forward to hopefully a big victory at the Supreme Court. Stay tuned, though. We'll talk about the upcoming section next.
Kentucky's Voice is your home for real news, real people, and real answers. But we can't do it without you. Your financial support helps us bring truth to the forefront, hold leaders accountable, and give a voice to the people of the Commonwealth. Join the fight today Give online at kyvoice.org or text KYVoice to 53555. Every gift makes a difference. Stand with us, speak up, stay strong. You are Kentucky's voice.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And we're back for the final segment. Man, time flies when you're having fun. Happy Friday to you. I'm again David Walls, Executive Director of the Family Foundation. Always a blessing to get to guest host this great program and just be a part of what's going on here with Kentucky's Voice as we continue to try to build a growing conservative pro-family grassroots movement across Kentucky. Again, if you're not familiar with the Family Foundation, I encourage you to go check our website out at kentuckyfamily.org. Our mission is to stand for Kentucky families and the biblical values that make them strong. And we're particularly active when the General Assembly is going on, as it is right now. The 2026 General Assembly is underway. It's hard to believe. Month one is just about wrapped up. And I'm also excited that Kentucky State Senator Max Wise is still with us, such a great leader and pro-family leader in the General Assembly and the Senate. But Senator Wise, things are picking up. There's been a whole lot of bills that have been filed already just in the first month. A number of important bills and some that I want to visit with you about today. But from your perspective, and I know you've been such an important voice really on educational issues in your time in the General Assembly. What are you seeing as an important issue that you hope at least the Senate and Lord willing both chambers gets to address this session?
Well, David, if you look at our top 10 bills or our priorities, some of those have already kind of trickled out, and you'll see about half of those are education-related bills that relates about K through 12 education policy. One such bill, I don't think it's got a priority number to it, but it's still an important bill that's been discussed already within our caucus, is on the anti-DEI in K through 12 schools. Senator Lindsey Tishner has taken a lead on this. And as you know, we have passed the anti-DEI at the post-secondary level with some legislation. And we've seen the positive effects that have came from that on post-secondary. But even with K through 12, Senator Tishner has done a really good job of getting some key pieces of evidence that has not came out just of the largest school district being Jefferson County Public Schools, but there are other districts still around the Commonwealth of Kentucky where she has been provided some evidence and some artifacts of this type of teaching style or this type of curriculum has been given to elementary-based classrooms. And so Senator Tishner has provided that to our caucus. We've had a really good discussion around that topic. Being a 60-day session, we kind of say it's kind of like a leaky faucet as bills to start to trickle out. But I think you're going to see a lot of momentum around that and a lot of comments that's going to be with Senator Tishner's bill as it relates to anti-DEI with K through 12.
Yeah, and that is Senate Bill 26, and that is an issue that we're in strong support of as well. And folks can visit our website at kentuckyfamily.org and learn more about that issue, as well as take action, encourage their legislators to support that issue. I'm glad, Senator Wise, you brought that one up, because I think, last session, the bill that you mentioned to ban and defund discriminatory DEI in our public universities was one of the most important, notable pieces of legislation that y'all passed. And this really is the next logical step. As you said, Senator Tishner's laid out some of this evidence, but both in Louisville and in Lexington, really the leaders of those government schools have been crystal clear, essentially about thumbing their nose against the General Assembly, really against President Trump and some of the things that he's tried to do in his administration to root out these discriminatory and harmful concepts out of our educational system. And they're, seem to be wanting to move full force ahead. And the reality is that these are harmful concepts. They teach children essentially to look at race as one of the most important identifying factors in terms of how you see the world. And honestly, Senator Wise, and I know you saw this, this clip went viral, but it was kind of Exhibit A when there was an interim hearing at the last part of the year on this issue heading into the session, where you saw these comments from State Representative Sarah Stalker, that went viral, but I think what she said was emblematic of some of the education establishment, certainly in Louisville and Lexington, where she said essentially she doesn't feel good about being white. She went on to make comments and say if she was a white male, she would feel even worse about that. And then she really wanted to see this whole framework continue to be in the public education system. And I don't know about you, Senator Wise, but I think we need to be telling the kids the exact opposite. They need to be focusing on learning, and they don't need to be focusing on dividing themselves by race.
David, I could not agree more. If you look at the basics of what we need to get back to, it's, cursive writing, which we've had legislation deal with that. We need to get back to the basics of education and not allowing ideology, indoctrination, anything like that to come before our school children, especially in grades K through 12. I'll say this too, Chairman Steve West is also a supporter of what Senator Tichenor is doing with this. And a lot of times, David, the education committee is not looking for issues. They find us. And when Representative Stalker, and our testimony that's provided, that all of a sudden shone a spotlight and a magnifying glass on what is happening in Kentucky with comments such as that. And so I think that particular issue really got a lot of momentum even behind it, that the legislature needs to be looking at this. And so I'm looking forward to seeing, how this policy is going to play out over the next few days as we get into the kind of the meat of the legislative session in the couple weeks ahead.
Yeah, I think that'll be incredibly important, and the DEI too, it's not just the kind of the racial side of it and leading with that. There's also the direct connection to the LGBTQ ideology that we have just seen time and time again. I remember actually when I was still living in Texas, I went to a school board meeting in Austin ISD when we were opposing a very harmful sex education curriculum that they were trying to impose on kindergarten students. And at that very meeting, they also were hiring DEI officers for the first time. This was probably about 10 years ago. And I remember kind of a light bulb went off and was like, man, the intersection of all these issues and what connects them all is an ideology that is antithetical to what this country was founded upon, and it really is antithetical to creating an environment where students can learn the things like you just said, the basics that we need to return and learn. So we certainly look forward and hope to see some encouraging progress on that issue. And I too thank Senator Tichenor for her work and Chairman West. Just great to have such strong educational advocates in those positions in the Kentucky Senate. Senator Wise, one of the other important issues, important Senate bill that I know has already been filed is Senate Bill 72 by Senator Donald Douglas. And this is a bill to protect medical conscience rights. It's an issue that we and many others have advocated on for multiple sessions. And Senator Douglas filed and helped secure passage of that bill in the Senate last session. We got all the way to the very last step over in the House, and it didn't get called up for a vote at the last minute. But I continue to be optimistic that we can get this issue done this session. And this bill would simply just protect the medical rights of conscience for our medical workers. It's a foundational freedom. It's something that's referenced very clearly in the Kentucky Constitution. Senator Wise, I know you've been a strong supporter. Why do you think it's so important that we protect the basic conscience rights of those in the healthcare field?
Well, absolutely. And there's no better bill sponsor to have than Senator Douglas, who is a medical doctor himself and has been in this field of work. And so it even strengthens the need of where you've got a legislator like Senator Douglas that sees this firsthand, and for his colleagues to be able to step up for their own values and beliefs of saying, what they're comfortable or not comfortable with in performing. And so this particular piece of legislation, like you mentioned, David, got through the Senate last year in a 60-day session. We're hoping, because of the time frame, that bill can proceed just like it did last session with a little more time, and that we don't run out the clock on a bill such as this, because I know a lot of House members were really wanting to be able to vote on this piece of legislation from the last session that we ended. And that's part of the process. A lot of times we see that some bills may not make it through in a session. It may take a session or two, but this is one, and you're exactly right. The Family Foundation has been advocating for, have been knocking on our doors here throughout the Capitol Annex, and you've done a really good job of advocating on this and numerous pieces of legislation. And I'm very hopeful. I'm very optimistic that this one can be achieved, and to check that off any type of list of priority bills that need to be done on behalf of your association.
Yeah. Well, and look, because at the end of the day, and I know Senator Wise, shares this sentiment, we work and advocate on these laws because they impact people's lives. We're talking about education. We're talking about raising the next generation. We're talking about the medical field. We're talking about ensuring that those that practice medicine are never forced or compelled to participate in a procedure that violates their conscience. We've continued to hear stories of those, particularly Christians in the medical field, that have been really concerned about moving forward because of some of these coercive situations that they find themselves in. I remember too, Senator Wise, University of Louisville's Dr. Josephson, who was fired for simply just speaking out in his expertise about his concerns many years ago against the gender transition craziness. He ended up, thanks to good work of our friends at Alliance Defending Freedom, getting a settlement, getting a little bit of justice from that situation. But I think that's emblematic of some of the concerns. And we want to see people of faith move into the medical field. We want to see Kentucky move to a place where those in the medical field want to come work, as opposed to the situation where we are now, where we're having some serious concerns about retaining people in those fields, so that, whether rural or urban, all across the state, we've got the doctors and nurses that we need. Well, Senator Wise, any other issues that you're working on closely that you'd like to share with our audience in our last few moments?
Just to stay engaged, I've always encouraged constituents and followers, to monitor. There's everything at today's fingertips. We may not be allowing visitors into the Senate chamber or the House chambers because of a temporary location, but that still doesn't mean that they cannot continue contacting legislators, visiting us in our offices in the Capitol Annex, as well as social media. We have live streams that are out there, YouTube channels, so many ways for them to monitor things. There's a lot of good House bills, especially as it relates around faith, family, and freedom, that I am monitoring, even though they've not made their way yet, some of those onto the Senate floor or into our hands in the Senate for our committee hearing. But it's my job also to work with Leader Rudy on the other side. If I see some things that have been filed on the House side saying, hey, would love to have that over into the Senate chambers. And so that communication is ongoing.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. So critically important for folks to make their voice heard right now. And folks can continue to do that on this issue and so many others at KentuckyFamily.org. Well, that's all for today's Kentucky Voice. A big thank you to my guest, Jonathan Saenz, and also Senator Max Wise. Senator Wise, thank you for joining us from your busy schedule today. Folks, the battle for faith, family, and freedom isn't just happening in Washington. It's happening right here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Let's keep standing for faith, family, and freedom. God bless.